not a problem.
Okay.
So, Hasan, as you're approaching culture, I want to know, how do you approach cultural humility and empathy in your coaching practice? Because, and I was just listening to something today or reading something today, in terms of how we show up
Hmm.
in communities who we're trying to help,
Yeah.
right? And then oftentimes we come in there on our white horses trying to solve a
Hmm.
problem, and we're not humble. It's kind of like
Yeah.
we have all the answers. So give me an
Yeah.
example of how do you tackle that in your approach?
I think the first major shock I had was 10 years ago when I was coaching someone in Saudi Arabia. And I kept on following the coach's guide to ask powerful questions to generate insights. And it went nowhere
Hmm.
because of the lack of understanding of what coaching is. But coaching in itself as a profession is Western in its context. It builds individual accountability versus community accountability, which two-thirds of the world is community accountability. It focuses on directness and pointedness to come straight to the point to ask the question that will shake someone and help them think through and generate that insight. So one third of the world is that. Of course, in the US, in the Western part of the world, critical reasoning, direct questions, individual accountability are the frameworks to follow. That may not be true in another part of the world. So my coaching needs to be informed by someone else from that cultural context, which means I need to be humble enough and curious enough to not go in with the assumptions or the framework of coaching, which is ask powerful questions, generate insights, build chemistry with your client. Building chemistry with your client does mean, in my context, 2 to 3 months versus the 1 or 2 sessions. I need to earn their trust versus assume the trust they understand what a coach is supposed to do. So, what I try to do is be culturally humble enough to enable the curiosity for my client to teach me their cultural context instead of making those assumptions. I also try and regularly examine my own bias and privilege because, like I said in the beginning, we're a social construct, and I have a position in society. How am I informing my own privilege and the biases that I carry? And that means again fumbling in a coaching conversation and learning from your client and getting informed by them how do they operate in their communities. So that's one aspect of it. Another very good technique is we need to analyze our own circle of coaches, and that I do also every 6 months is to analyze how much diverse coaches do I have in my own circle, because they are going to inform me, they are going to teach me, they are going to let me understand the context that they operate in. So if you are a coach, the first thing you can do is my top 10 people, how diverse are they? And it can be race, ethnicity, gender, whatever it is. We need to circulate that so that we get educated from other coaches on how do they coach in different cultural contexts, and also continue to build our awareness and challenge our own blind spots because we all have them.
And that's so true. And, just looking at the self-awareness that's
Hmm.
required, right? As we're trying to help to bring around equity and justice, belonging, healing,
Hmm.
all of those aspects. Um, how much self-awareness do you need, and how do you build that up? Right? I
Yeah,
mean, that's a tough thing to do, to,
yeah,
to be reflective of who you are and how you could make a difference. Sorry if I made this question
yeah.
really tough, but it's fun.
I think self awareness is foundational. That's the birthplace. If you haven't gone through your own personal transformation, how can you expect to take someone else on that journey? It's so easy. We put it all on the coaches to say, you're the personal transformation expert. We are going to give you a client and just transform this individual. The coach also is a human being and they have to go through their own transformation, have their own failures and learnings from it. This also reminds me of of another client I had who was going from US to an Asian country, and he asked me, "So how do I build my self-awareness? I have read these many books, and you know what? I have traveled the world. I have traveled to 85 countries, and I have a lot of cultural intelligence built into how I operate. So this is not new to me." And I said, "Share with me an example of what those 85 countries travel looks like." And because he's a senior executive, flies into, for example, Manila, stays in a five-star hotel, does all the meetings, 2 days, visits the office, and back to the US. And I said, think about it. You're just ticking the box that you visited Philippines. For you to get the awareness, I want you to stay in Philippines for 6 months, live in a neighborhood which is dominated by the majority, which is Filipinos, eat their food, buy groceries from their store, navigate the traffic, and after 6 months, you will be a different person.
Hmm.
Because the 6 months you'll get so frustrated that you'll have either a choice, I want to exit, or you will say, well, why is this different? Why do they do it differently? You'll become curious and you'll start to learn their ways of living, working, operating, which is an enhancement from your own perspective on your cultural competence. So I do feel self-awareness is foundational, but reading books, watching movies, or ticking the box for traveling countries is not going to help us. What is going to help us is the experiences that we intentionally create by living and operating in those environments, which I think, again, as I said, is going to be a luxury. Not everyone has the opportunity to go and live in another, but we can still create those experiences if we really want to transform. The other aspect of it is also us as human beings. And again, for equity work, this means understanding my own relationship with power, privilege, and systemic oppression, which is a very hard thing to do because your inward focus, you will start to look for. One of the exercises that I do with coaches is to build your own personal inclusion narrative. And sometimes some of the coaches struggle by saying, well, you're asking me to find exclusionary experiences from childhood. I can't find one. I didn't have one. And if you think about it, think about the privilege that you're carrying with it. Because another coach from a different background has listed 11 exclusionary experiences. There is a difference in your experience and their experience. And of course, this is not to shame you, but this is to understand your relationship with privilege and power and how you were blessed in certain ways where others were not. That self awareness also shifts the conversation. Because I don't believe in shaming people into compliance, that doesn't never work.
Yeah.
What works is, are you aware? And in some cases, switching on the spotlight in a dark place to say, did you see this? And now that you see it, what are you going to do about it? And that starts the whole conversation of why does this difference exist? And my role in society, am I promoting this difference or am I causing harm unintentionally without being aware? How do I take personal responsibility and shift the conversation?
That's really interesting because I run into coaches who have said that I could coach anyone from any culture, and I laugh about that because anyway, I wouldn't even get on that. I'm not getting on that soapbox.
Yeah.
But